Jayden Daniels, he's been one of the stories of the season all year. He was the shoe-in for Offensive Rookie of the Year for most of the season. Now he becomes not just a rookie storyline, but one of the definitive stories, one of the definitive memories of this 2024 NFL season.
Washington runs through one tackle. Joseph tries to take the angle, but McLaurin's got too much speed. And again, that's the challenge of this offense. If you put numbers over the top of the receivers, they run it. If you try to pressure them, you're exposed because they have more blockers on the perimeter when they spit the ball out there to their receivers.
Wow. Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman, and don't you just love it when a plan comes together? We talked so much about how good this divisional round weekend looked on paper. We're only halfway through, and my goodness, are we getting the goods. 2 games down, 1/2 of each conference championship game is set. 2 games that were very entertaining for very different reasons. A slobber knocker in the early game as the Kansas City Chiefs advance over the Houston Texans at Arrowhead. They are back in the AFC title game. We're going to cover that in the second half of the show. My buddy Ben Arthur of FoxSports.com is going to hop on to help me talk about that Chiefs win over Houston. But we got to start this show with the offensive display, the vulgar display of power at Ford Field, and the Washington Commanders, a 9.5-point underdog, blow up the scoreboard and shock the Detroit Lions 45-31 to advance to the NFC Championship game. They will travel to play either the Rams or the Eagles next weekend. Obviously, we'll find out where they're going on Sunday. But let's do this. And I say shock not because of the result. We said it in the preview episode. You shouldn't be surprised if Washington keeps this game a lot closer than the spread indicates. I will admit, I did not have the guts to pick the Washington Commanders. But what's shocking is not that they won. They wound up beating Detroit's ass. I mean, consider this. Commanders scored their final points of this game to get to 45. Over-under for this game was 55.5, by the way. We blew past that halfway through the game. But the Commanders went up 45-28 with half of the fourth quarter still to play. Think about that. For starters, the Commanders, the cardiac Commanders, the most thrilling team in football for most of this season. This was the first time since their bye week that they won a game by more than one possession. The last 6 weeks have been walk-off and heart-stopping finish after heart-stopping finish. Every single week with this. So go figure that their most comfortable win in 6 weeks comes at Ford Field against the 15-2 Lions. The Lions who had a point differential of plus 222. The Lions who won, it felt like half their games by 3, if not 4 possessions this season, who scored 50 points on multiple occasions. That was the team that the Commanders maybe didn't decide to blow out, but I'm sorry, if there was a game that I thought the Commanders would need to scrape and claw to win, it was probably this one. And with a lot of guys, with a lot of respect to a lot of guys that helped make it happen, and we will talk about that, because, yes, it was a total team effort. And I want to get into some really fun moments for a lot of guys on this team as Dan Quinn and his guys make it back to the NFC title game for the first time since 91. With a lot of respect to them, it's pretty obvious that the difference was this sensational rookie quarterback. I run out of ways to describe Jayden Daniels, but when you are the best player on the field in a game against the best team in the NFL all season long, It's pretty incredible. And the theme of the night was that both of these defenses were overmatched. Can you tell? 45-28. Lions ran the ball at will. Commanders were averaging, what was it? I mean, Brian Robinson Jr. averaging 5 yards a pop, moving the ball up and down the field. But the difference was this. One guy in this game was masterful. You see it on the screen there. 350 total yards, 299 throwing, 51 rushing, 2 touchdowns, picked up 2 fourth downs with his arm, picked up another one with his legs. The other quarterback lost a crucial fumble in the red zone in the early going, followed that up with 3 interceptions, a back-breaking pick 6 early on, not to mention an end zone interception at the end of the first half. And obviously that leads to the biggest mind bender, the brain teaser of it all. The guy with the 4 turnovers, 9th-year veteran, Jared Goff. The guy who delivered in seemingly every big moment, who has never looked flustered by the bright lights of the NFL at one point going all the way back to September. It's the rookie. It's Jayden Daniels, who's still in his first NFL playoffs. The 4th rookie ever to win multiple playoff games dating back to the 50s. And combined with last week's win in Tampa, I love this one because these are not obviously overmatched opponents that Jayden Daniels is beating. Dating back to last week's win in Tampa, Jayden Daniels, the first rookie since at least 1950, 70 years, to beat 2 top 5 offenses in the playoffs. The Buccaneers and the Lions scored points better than all of them. Jayden Daniels beat them both. Very unsurprising that he was Tom Brady's LFG player of the game.
Who else? Jayden Daniels, what a performance, almost 300 yards passing to go on the road against the number 1 ranked team in your conference. How are you able to rise up today and make every great decision in every big moment, whether it was a zone read, a pass? How did that come about today for you, Jayden?
I mean, first, I want to ask you what LFG stands for.
It's inappropriate. It's a family-friendly program, but it's
it's just the preparation. Cliff and me, we talk countless hours of everything, how we want to attack the defense, and I see what I see. I trust my eyes, and I prepare for these moments like this.
So tell me, and I know you and Cliff have such a great relationship, who's really enabled you to be so calm, so confident in your rookie year?
Yeah, I think it's the whole offensive staff. They do a great job of putting what they know I can handle on my plate, which I feel like is a lot. They feel like that too. I just prepare. I prepare the right way. I don't cheat the game. You got to put in the work to get the product out on Sundays. So, I just thank my coaching staff, really.
Yeah, and I'm sure they love calling plays for you and seeing you lead the team. I've heard about your work ethic. That's one of your weapons. But to me, what do you see as your bigger weapon, your legs or your arm?
Man, I think it's the best of both worlds. There's guys in the league that can make plays with the both, and I consider myself one of them.
Yeah, you've done it all season long. This was an unbelievable performance by you and your team. Complimentary football at its best. Congratulations. We'll see you next week.
Every game that I broadcast, I award the LFG Player of the Game to that one player who makes me say, let's go.
I could probably spend the rest of the segment just reading off fun Jayden Daniels stats that we've found, and we did find a lot of them. For instance, Jayden Daniels has become the first rookie quarterback in history to throw multiple touchdown passes in multiple playoff games. How about the fact that Jayden Daniels was 7 of 9 for 109 yards when pressured by the Lions on Saturday night? Jared Goff, 4 of 14 for 65 yards with 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. I could keep doing that. And to be clear, Jayden Daniels, he's been one of the stories of the season all year. He was the shoe-in for Offensive Rookie of the Year for most of the season. Now he becomes not just a rookie storyline, but one of the definitive stories, one of the definitive memories of this 2024 NFL season. I said at some point in December that heading into the playoffs, and obviously a lot can and has changed, but for so much of the regular season, the Detroit Lions felt like the team of the year, this team of destiny that had taken a step forward at every turn under Dan Campbell and was poised to reach the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history. Not on his own, but so much due to him, Jayden Daniels has derailed all of that and lifted up an equally downtrodden franchise. The Commanders had the longest conference title game drought in the NFC, 33 years, not since 1991. He has them a game away from the Super Bowl. I turned 36 at the tail end of the regular season. I was alive when the Commanders last won the Super Bowl in 1991. I don't remember it. I have no real memories of the football team located in Washington being a real threat to reach the Super Bowl, let alone win it. Jayden Daniels changed that on Saturday night. It is one of the coolest things about this 2024 season. It's one of the cooler stories in sports in recent memory, in my opinion. Having said all of that, having made sure to give Jayden Daniels his due, I do want to highlight so much else about this Commanders team that is insanely cool to watch and to think about. Because think about all the other pieces that had to come into place for this to happen. I mean, for starters, Josh Harris and his ownership group have to buy the Commanders. They have to get their first head coaching hire right, which they do by hiring Dan Quinn, who didn't seem likely to win Coach of the Year back in, I don't know, late November, early December, when it kind of felt like Washington was on a little bit of a downturn. Curious to see how that's aged, because goodness gracious, few people have done a better job than him. On top of that, Dan Quinn had to nail his hires. Offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury coached a phenomenal game, outcoached Ben Johnson, who will very likely be hired as an NFL head coach here in the coming weeks, especially now that he can talk to other teams with the Lions out of the playoffs. Cliff Kingsbury. They nail the number 2 overall pick in the draft in Jayden Daniels, who becomes Offensive Rookie of the Year. And so many other decisions. This is just a baseline of research, but think about the stuff that happened in this game. Jeremy Chin, veteran safety, free agency ad by Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, first-year GM, by the way, another hire that the Commanders had to nail. Jeremy Chin, free agency ad, 12 tackles and the game-ending interception. Frankie Louvu, one of the most underrated hybrid players in the NFL, free agency ad, 9 tackles and a crucial fumble recovery. Dorrance Armstrong, who followed Dan Quinn from Dallas to Washington, 3 tackles, 2 sacks. Austin Eckler, the washed-up running back. People chuckled at Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz joining this team in the twilight years of their career. Eckler, 88 scrimmage yards. Zach Ertz, 5 catches, 28 yards, a touchdown, and a 4th down conversion. Bobby Wagner, Quinn's buddy from way back in the Legion of Boom days in Seattle. Free agency ad, 8 tackles. Mikey Sainristil getting no shine whatsoever because he's the second best rookie on his team. But he's pretty damn good in his own right. The 3rd round pick, the cornerback out of Michigan, 2 PBUs, 2 interceptions in this game. Yes, Jayden Daniels is the catalyst for all of it, but so many small decisions that the Commanders have made going back to January and February of last year have paid dividends. Throughout the season, yes, but at Ford Field on Saturday night, it was all a crucial component of, again, not just eking by the Giants, the Lions, but being the much better team in the process. Phenomenal story, regardless of who they play. I can't wait to see how they follow it up. I said it last week. I don't think they're going to blink because their quarterback never does. I guarantee you, even if it's the Eagles, people will be taking them a lot more seriously in this upcoming matchup than they did heading into Detroit. On the flip side of this, I always want to make sure we give the winning team the proper amount of attention and the proper amount of praise for getting the dub. But it is particularly heartbreaking. Probably not if you're an NFC North rival fan, but I do mean that. I think the Detroit Lions were one of the dominant narratives of this entire season. Dan Campbell takes over in 21, leads them from 3-13-1 to missing the playoffs by a night in 2022 to reaching the NFC title game in 2023. And with 7 minutes to go, and it's more than likely over. I mean, we had a long time to process this heartbreak for the Lions on Saturday night. It's hard not to think about Dan Campbell in the wake of that loss to San Francisco in the NFC title game last year, simply saying, I don't know if we'll be back here. It's hard to get here. You need a lot of things to go right. And this is exactly what he was talking about, because not to make excuses for them, but you watch Washington carve through that defense. You watch through a lot of teams carve through Detroit's defense over the last 6 or so weeks. It's hard not to think about the starts and potential Pro Bowls lost to injured reserve. Aiden Hutchinson did not wind up playing a role again for this team after getting hurt in week 6. Aleem McNeil goes down in December. Carlton Davis, starting cornerback, misses a lot of the year. Half of the Lions secondary missed a solid chunk of the year. Malcolm Rodriguez. They got Alex Anzalone back for the playoffs, but missed a significant chunk of the year. All of that stuff has to go right for you to improve on losing in the NFC Championship. And they had their moments here, to be sure. I mean, the Lions moved the ball equally as well as the Commanders. Jahmyr Gibbs averaged 8 yards a carry. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a phenomenal day. I feel like people in Detroit are probably going to take note of the fact that the Lions only ran the ball 23 times in this game, and Jahmyr Gibbs only got 14 carries, and they still ran for 200 yards on the day. Probably point out that maybe the Lions outthought themselves here. Maybe they should have stuck to the ground game a little more reliably, looked for a little bit more balance before the score got out of whack. I digress. The point is, even when you're 15-2 plus 222 in point differential, getting to the conference championship game is incredibly difficult. And it feels like a heartbreaking missed opportunity. I will say, I saw people afterward saying this could be the end for this team. I don't necessarily buy that. I think the Lions are poised to bring the vast majority of this team back. Their only key free agents, I think, really key free agents, right guard Kevin Zeitler, two of their top cornerbacks, Carlton Davis and Emmanuel Mosley. There's work to be done, but the core of this roster is poised to do this again and probably again after that. But now the problem becomes potential brain drain. Can you count on replicating this without Ben Johnson and or Aaron Glenn? Does one of those guys stay? Do they both surprise everyone and hold off on taking head coaching jobs for another year? That's kind of hard to imagine. And how will those hires go if you have to replace those guys? I mean, we saw the Philadelphia Eagles returned a very similar team in 2023 that reached the Super Bowl in 22, but the coaching hires weren't right. The chemistry wasn't the same, and they didn't ultimately come close. The Lions should be good for the foreseeable future, but you just can't count on trips to the NFC Championship game on a regular basis. That's what makes what Kansas City is doing in the AFC so remarkable. We will get to that, but as exciting as a night as this was for the Washington Commanders, and it definitely is, it's a sobering reminder that even in a storybook season in its own right for Detroit, where so much went right and so much was fun and exciting, you can still wind up going one and done in the playoffs. And, the Lions have been used to the pain of irrelevance for a long, long time. And I'm sure they would take the pain of missed opportunity over the pain of irrelevance, but it is a different kind of sting altogether. I'm sure that's going to be tough to move past in Detroit. What a game. Okay. Yeah. I had to dump all of my thoughts on that out there. I think we handled that. As many thoughts as we had points. That was the goal, and I think we accomplished it. Phenomenal way to get divisional weekend started in the NFC. Now let's take it over to the other side where not as many points were scored in Kansas City, but a very entertaining game all the same in the early window. All right, let's jump to the earlier game on Saturday. Definitely not the shootout that we saw in Detroit, but a very entertaining defensive chess match played out at Arrowhead Stadium. The Kansas City Chiefs once again returning to the AFC Championship game after a 23-14 win against the Houston Texans. Houston made it interesting for 3 quarters, we'll say, and it really felt like the Chiefs put the pedal down once the fourth quarter started. They pull away. Patrick Mahomes, as the starter of the Kansas City Chiefs, has never ended his season prior to the AFC title game. We know it. We know what the Chiefs have done. It's still wild to say, but every playoff run starts here. They get a win over the Texans, and here to talk about the intricacies of it, the good and the bad, our good buddy Ben Arthur of FoxSports.com was nice enough to jump on with me on a Saturday night. Ben, I appreciate it, man. How are you?
Doing well, Dave. How are you?
I'm great, and I was thinking about you all through the fourth quarter of this game because, look, we knew the score here. We know this Texans offense has struggled. We know that the offensive line has been a work in progress for a lot of the season, and that was apparent from the get-go, but like I said, it really felt like Steve Spagnuolo feasted on the Texans in the fourth quarter of this game. CJ Stroud sacked 8 times on the day, but 5 of those came with Kansas City holding a lead in the fourth quarter. George Karlaftis had 3 sacks in like 10 minutes. I'm not even exaggerating. What did the Chiefs do to take advantage of the Texans' protection, and how can Houston fix this moving forward?
Yeah, I think from the Chiefs' perspective, right? I mean, they just overwhelmed the Texans up front, and this was a season-long issue, right? It wasn't like the Chiefs unlocked some kind of code how to get to CJ Stroud. I mean, they've been susceptible up front all year. CJ was the second most sacked quarterback behind Caleb Williams at 52 sacks on the year. So this was an issue all season. And then you throw in a creative defensive mind like Spags, who knows how to use his DBs and LBs to kind of confuse offensive linemen as well and just kind of overwhelm the protection for Houston. I mean, you kind of figured it would be a long day. And so yeah, how they fix it, that's a good question, because they were supposed to be better up front this year. Like in 2023 is when they had a lot more shuffling up front. This year they had most of their guys in the spots they wanted them to be. Titus Howard, their right tackle, played a lot of left guard this season, but for the most part, it's kind of what they wanted up front. So whether that means a new offensive line coach, I think Bobby Slovic, people are going to talk a lot about his job, about his future in Houston, just because of not only this game in Kansas City, but the entirety of the season, because they have to figure this out, that they have to be able to protect CJ. We saw him limping for, I feel like, a good portion of the game. Some of those hits he took, I mean, those were on scrambles, but yeah, they have to figure out a better way to protect him so he can get the ball to these weapons on the outside.
It's crazy too. And I saw the stat floating around. I'm guessing you saw it too, but the Chiefs become, I think, the first team in playoff history to get outgained by 120 plus yards and not get a takeaway and still win the game. Cause yeah, I mean, you look at it, if you can ignore the big number 8 in the sacks column, like CJ Stroud had 245, hit some really nice throws, was able to stand in against pressure and find guys over the middle of the field often. They ran for 5 yards a carry. Like it seemed like it worked. And when they went on that, they ate up half the third quarter with a 15-play touchdown drive, it really felt like, okay, this is the recipe for beating the Chiefs. Like, you've just got to hang around long enough to make it interesting in the fourth quarter. Don't let them put you behind the sticks too much to where you make a mistake. And it just didn't matter. And you mentioned it, of Spags confusing them. My memories of this game are going to involve a lot of Texans offensive linemen getting confused about which blitzing safety to deal with, or, Chris Jones kicking out to defensive end to get a sack off of Blake Fisher, the rookie right tackle. It felt like he did such a good job of not giving the Texans the right idea of what he was going to do. And it overwhelmed them at the end of this game. I mean, 5 sacks in the fourth quarter with the outcome still very much in balance.
Yeah. And Dave, you talked about that third quarter drive the Texans had, right? It actually took, they ate up 10 minutes.
It was incredible. That was one of the most impressive drives I've seen all year, honestly.
Exactly. Yeah. And the crushing thing about that too was Kaimi Fairbairn missed the PAT after that, which would have tied the game at 13 at that point. So the Texans were still trailing 13-12 at that point of the game. And I bring that up to bring this point up. I mean, to beat the Chiefs, you have to be so good on the margins, like throughout the game, right? And that's ultimately, you brought up that stat about how the Texans, outgained the Chiefs by over 100, didn't give away the ball, but they weren't good on the margins, right? We talked about the sacks, but their one trip to the red zone, they didn't convert. They had to settle for a field goal. Kaimi Fairbairn missed a field goal in the, what was it? I want to say the second
quarter. Yeah. Second quarter.
Yeah. It was like the 50+ yarder. And then they had the field goal blocked late in the fourth quarter, which kind of sealed it. And then even just the start of the game too, the 60+ yard kickoff return the Chiefs had to give the Chiefs essentially those 3 points at the beginning of the game. I mean, you have to be able to contend with Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and these Chiefs. You have to be almost perfect execution-wise throughout the game, because they're historically great in one possession games, right? So you can't, it doesn't matter kind of in the end, like, okay, maybe they didn't really do a whole lot that was maybe super egregious, but it's kind of the little things against the Chiefs that can add up. And for the Texans, that was a lot on special teams, in specific moments on offense. And then even though the defense played relatively well, I mean, there were a couple, I mean, they couldn't contain Travis Kelce. That was probably the biggest
Travis
thing.
Kelce very predictably chose the divisional round of the playoffs to have his breakout performance of the day. Just completely, I can't even say unguarded. With all due respect to Travis Kelce, a lot of it was just, or I can't even say unguardable, because so much of it was unguarded. And I mean, I think that's a testament to good coaching, that the guy with all of the playoff numbers, all of the best playoff numbers in NFL history, him and Jerry Rice, there's Travis Kelce averaging 17 yards a catch. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, the second straight season, Dave, where people have said Travis Kelce is kind of washed at this point. Is he going to be on the downward spiral, right? He's 35 years old, but he's starting this offseason, this playoff journey, and showing that when the lights are brightest in the most important games, in the most important moments, he steps up, just like he did last year, right? This was his highest, this was his best game in terms of receiving yards, in terms of kind of, I guess, clutch factor, however you want to quantify that. He didn't look like this at any point in the regular season, but this is who Travis Kelce is. This is why he's one of the best, arguably maybe the best tight end of all time. He comes to play in these moments. And even at the beginning of the game, if you remember, the Texans had those two massive red zone stands to kind of keep the Texans within, it was a 6-3 game early, but then he had the big 49-yard catch and run that set up Kareem Hunt's touchdown. I think that made it 13-3, and they kind of never looked back from there. So
okay, I wanted to touch on that too, because, and you're so right, the Texans just weren't good enough on the margins in this game. The funny thing is, the Chiefs were like only good in the margins, because like you look at the numbers, like the Chiefs don't jump out to you. Anything they did, they went 2 of 5 in the red zone. They didn't run the ball particularly great. Xavier Worthy was the only receiver on this team who caught a pass. It was literally all Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy. You mentioned the catch and run by Kelce. That comes one play after a dropped ball by Hollywood Brown on a potential explosive play down to the red zone. The one touchdown the one Patrick Mahomes touchdown to Travis Kelce comes on 3rd down in the red zone, and he does his Superman act where he's diving and throwing. It felt like the Chiefs were iffy when it was low stakes or normal stakes, and then the minute the stakes get ratcheted up, they come through like they always do. Like, I know we've seen this so many times, but it's incredible the way that they are able to dial in when it absolutely has to happen.
Yeah, they have a championship Super Bowl DNA, no doubt about it. And it always shows up just when we think, oh, is it actually gonna show up this time? That they figure out a way to kind of remind us why they are the way that they are. And you brought up those examples on offense, but it was the same thing on defense. Like when they needed to get a sack or a stop, or I think of that 4th and 10, that kind of wild 4th and 10 for the Texans. They probably should have called a timeout there. I think it was midway through the 4th quarter, and I think Karlaftis got the sack there. But
10 minutes to play in the 4th, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's moments like that where it doesn't matter the phase of the ball, right? Offense, defense, special teams, that they are so well coached, so disciplined, and execute so well. That this is why they won 11 one-score games during the regular season, because they do the little things longer and more consistently well, like than anyone else in football. And so it's kind of crazy to look at it like at the end of all these games, but they figure out a way to kind of keep doing it. They're just so impressive in that regard.
It is. And I typically hate to do this. I don't enjoy talking about refereeing. I think calls go either way in every game. Refs err. That's what they do. They're human beings. Refs miss things all the time. And I think over the course of a 60-minute game where each team is running 50-plus plays, you're going to have opportunities to even things out. This is a situation where I do think it bears mentioning, if not because of the swings, also just because of the amount of conversation it generated afterward. The gist of it is basically 2 big roughing the passer calls that go Kansas City's way. A lot of times I think, like, look, you got to protect the quarterback. That's the rules of the game, whether we like it or not. I thought both of these were pretty bad calls. I thought both of the first one, Will Anderson puts a hard hit on Patrick Mahomes. That's his job. It looked like helmet-to-helmet contact in the moment. It was not. And the second one, in the second half, Patrick Mahomes is dancing around, avoiding tacklers, using his blockers to get extra yardage for a solid 6 seconds before he finally starts to go down, and 2 tacklers hit him, made harder contact with each other than they did with Mahomes, in all honesty, and he gets a flag for that. And to top it all off, a few minutes later, I'm going to call it a flop. Patrick Mahomes absolutely flopped to try to get an extra penalty just before the Travis Kelce touchdown. It led to a lot of conversation, and it's not just me saying that. I believe we got some sound real quick of Houston Texans defenders talking about it.
We knew it was going to be us against the refs going into this game. And, I talked to you guys early this week. And I was just saying, man, we got to go out there and we got to do us better. And, in some instances we didn't do that, some instances we did. So we just got to keep going, man. Next offseason, get the guys together, man. And, everybody just coming together and just keep building that team chemistry and get past this hump.
Everybody know how it is playing up here. You can never leave it into the refs' hands. But the whole world see, man, like what it is, bro. But it is what it is. Like I said, when it come down to it, you can't never leave it into the refs' hands, man, and things like that. But it's all good, though.
I get it. I get the frustration. These 2 penalties led to 10 Chiefs points in a game that they win by 9 points. 99% of the time, and it's a meme at this point, right? Like every week people talk about the refs favoring the Kansas City Chiefs. 99% of the time, I think it's exaggerated or outright BS. I don't know that this decided the game. I think the Chiefs were the better team all day. I still understand the frustration if you're the Houston Texans coming out of this game.
Yeah, and I go to that point you made, Dave. Like, I don't know that it's the reason they lost the game. And look, refs are human at the end of the day, and that they don't make the right calls. I mean, we can also kind of see these replays, right? But I also think, honestly, when your teams like the Chiefs, when you've had so much success as an individual player, as a team, and you have that reputation, honestly, sometimes you just get the benefit of the doubt, and no one's ever going to say that, but it certainly seems that way. And we've certainly seen that type of situation play out with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs over kind of the last couple years, and what they've done and what they've accomplished. But yeah, I kind of go, but you kind of have to live with it, right? And the Texans, based on what Will Anderson was saying and the way D'Amico Ryans was speaking post game, I mean, you going into an environment like this, you kind of prepare for that, right? That some of these, that the Chiefs may kind of get that friendly whistle, and so you just have to kind of move past that. But again, back to the previous point, I don't think that it's the reason why they lost this game. There are too many other situations that we discussed, Dave, like on the margins, whether it was special teams, missed field goals, missed PAT, kind of coverage lapses, letting CJ Stroud get hit, taking, all those things like that kind of add up and compound, that I think in this case had a bigger impact than those two personal fouls in particular, right? Will Anderson's roughing the passer, and then the other one later in the game. So I think we have to look more at that.
This is not why Kansas City won, and I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep about it in that regard. Like the better team won, the better team is advancing. That's all fine. Nobody got robbed here. But just in general, I would like to see there be a wider variety of things that refs can review. A similar thing happened in the Detroit-Washington game, where a face mask was called on a tackle that wound up being by the shoulder pad, just absolutely, completely not a foul. But because the ref called it a face mask in the moment, it's not reviewable. I think the same thing should be capable, with roughing in certain circumstances, where you can look and see, was there helmet to helmet on this, or did the ref just hear loud contact and assume the worst? And then on top of that, this isn't a comment just on Patrick Mahomes. This goes for a lot of players, a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL these days. It is now, I would say, common for quarterbacks to be capable of picking up massive amounts of yardage with their feet. I mean, damn near every good quarterback in the NFL is capable of picking up 8, 10, 20, 30 yards with his feet. If quarterbacks are that capable in both facets of the game, once a quarterback crosses the line of scrimmage and is a runner, I think we got to treat them more like football players than quarterback. I know that can be dicey. And I know we got to protect the guys that make this sport so entertaining, but it's tough to see a quarterback draw a roughing flag when he's trying to pick up extra yardage the way that a running back would. I mean, I don't even know how to cope with that as a defender when you see flags get thrown for stuff like that. That's just tough.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, Dave. And we've seen so many examples where quarterbacks kind of take advantage of the advantage that they have, right? And either it seems like they're going out of bounds or being too late to slide, like defenders. And people have been talking about this for years at this point, but it's becoming more and more impossible to be a defender in those types of situations. And so we need to take a hard look at that, right? And make sure we're at least making it somewhat 50-50, right? Because in these situations, quarterbacks have the overwhelming advantage, and the really smart ones are increasingly taking advantage of those kind of supposed loopholes, if you kind of want to look at it like that.
I guess if I'm looking for a silver lining for Houston, Saturday went better than last year's appearance in the divisional round of the playoffs. This was a more competitive game than they gave the Baltimore Ravens last year. At the same time, there's still a pretty clear gap between Houston and the AFC power brokers. I mean, Baltimore blew past them last year. Kansas City, like I said, put the pedal down in the fourth quarter and really kind of showed the gap between these two teams. So that's something for them to aspire to. Better than last year, still not quite good enough. And then obviously on the other side of this, I mean, goodness gracious, man. I said it at the top, but we haven't had an AFC Championship game without Kansas City since the last time they weren't there was the 2017 season. That was when Patrick Mahomes was a backup. It's been an incredible run, whether they get back to the Super Bowl or not. I do think that's worth appreciating before we focus on this upcoming game against Baltimore or Buffalo.
Yeah, we have to appreciate greatness while we have it. This is living history, right? And I don't know. I just think about like the parallels with LeBron James on the NBA side, right? I don't think we appreciate sometimes that we're witnessing history, and we get so I don't think we always appreciate the moment as much as we need to. And what Patrick Mahomes is doing is just incredible. He's the ultimate winner. He truly is, and excited to kind of see whoever the Chiefs draw in the AFC Championship game at Arrowhead, whether it's Josh Allen and the Bills or Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. It's going to be a fun one, and as we see if they can get back to the Super Bowl and become the first team to three-peat.
It's so true. Like regardless of what happens on Sunday, we either get Lamar trying to avenge last year's game against Pat at Arrowhead instead of in Baltimore, or we get another edition of Chiefs Bills in the playoffs, which who's mad about that?
Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. Who's mad about that? Either way, it's going to be amazing. But I enjoyed this game a lot. Like for a game that the Chiefs wound up winning by 9 points that maybe looked lopsided in the fourth quarter. This was a fun chess match. I enjoyed wrapping it up with you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on.
No problem, Dave. Thanks for having me.
That does it for the show, but we are not even close to done with our divisional weekend shows. Obviously, we've got the other half of the bracket to deal with. 2 more games today, Eagles-Rams in the early window, and then the finale, obviously, Lamar versus Josh, Ravens versus Bills. We will be back Monday to recap all of that and dive into our conference championship games. Next time you hear from me, we will have our Final Four set. We'll dive into that. Talk about whatever other news and updates we need to get to coming out of the weekend. Based on the way the last couple weeks have gone, we'll probably have a coaching search nugget or two to throw at you. We'll see how it goes. Until then, enjoy the games. We'll be here with you to break them all down once they're over. I appreciate it as always. Talk to y'all real soon.